My parents stole the money I had been saving for 3 years to buy my own car and put a down payment on a house, and they used it to surprise my 17-year-old sister with a brand new vehicle. And I found out while watching them hand her the keys in our front yard like some kind of perfect family commercial. I still remember the exact moment everything shifted. It was late spring in Columbus, Ohio, the air warm enough that the windows in our small 2-story house were cracked open, letting in the smell of freshly cut grass from the neighbors' lawns. I had been living at home since graduating from Ohio State, working full-time at a marketing firm downtown, carefully stacking every spare dollar into a metal lockbox I kept hidden in the back of my closet behind old winter coats. I did not trust banks after watching my parents juggle credit cards and loans my entire childhood, so I kept most of my savings in cash and a small portion in a separate account they did not know about. 3 years. 3 years of skipped vacations, packed lunches, and saying no to weekends in Chicago with friends. 3 years of telling myself that discipline now meant freedom later. My dream was simple. A reliable car of my own and a small townhouse somewhere near German Village, maybe even a place with exposed brick and a tiny patio. I had everything calculated down to the last dollar. One evening, after dinner, my parents knocked on my bedroom door. That alone felt strange. They usually just barged in. I opened it and saw both of them standing there, my father with his arms crossed, my mother wearing that tight smile she used when she was about to ask for something. They sat on the edge of my bed and started talking about family, about how important it was to support each other. I listened quietly, already sensing where this was heading. Then my mother finally said they needed help with a gift for my younger sister, Chloe. I asked what kind of gift required this level of buildup. My father answered with forced enthusiasm that they wanted to buy Chloe a car for her 17th birthday, something safe and reliable, something that would make her feel special. When I asked how much they needed, they named a number that made my stomach drop. It was nearly everything I had saved. I remember staring at them, thinking I had misheard. I asked them to repeat it, and they did, adding that it was not really borrowing, it was investing in family. They promised they would pay me back eventually. Eventually. That word has ruined more lives than people admit. I told them no. I said I had been saving for years for my own car and house, that I could not give them almost all my money for a gift I did not even agree with. Chloe was 17. She did not need a brand new car. A used one would have been more than enough. They looked at me like I had just insulted them. My father's face turned red, and my mother's smile vanished. They started accusing me of being selfish, of favoring my own future over my sister's happiness. They reminded me that I lived under their roof. They said family sacrifices for each other. I held my ground. I told them I would not finance a luxury surprise while my own goals were within reach. The more calmly I spoke, the louder they became. They tried guilt, then anger, then disappointment. When none of it worked, they stormed out of my room, slamming the door so hard the picture frames rattled on the wall. We did not speak the rest of the night. We lived in the same house, but it felt like a battlefield. I locked my bedroom door and stayed inside, headphones on, pretending I could not hear them whispering in the kitchen. The next morning, I left early for work. The sky over downtown Columbus was gray, and I remember feeling strangely proud of myself for standing firm. When I returned home that evening, everything seemed normal. My parents were watching television. Chloe was scrolling on her phone. No one mentioned the argument. I took that silence as a sign they had accepted my decision. That was my mistake. A few days passed. Chloe's birthday was approaching, and the house buzzed with small preparations. Balloons, cake orders, relatives texting about stopping by. I never once thought to check my lockbox. Why would I? I had hidden it well. I trusted that even in anger, my parents would not cross that line. On the morning of Chloe's birthday, I woke up to loud laughter outside. At first, I thought it was just decorations being set up. I put on a sweatshirt and walked toward the front door, confused by the noise in the yard. When I stepped outside, the sunlight hit me so hard I had to squint. And then I saw it. Parked in the driveway was a shiny silver sedan, polished so clean it reflected the blue sky. A large red bow sat on the hood. My parents stood beside it, grinning, while Chloe jumped up and down, her hands over her mouth in exaggerated surprise. A few neighbors had gathered, clapping and filming on their phones. It looked like something straight out of a commercial shot near the Lincoln Memorial, staged and perfect. My heart started pounding. I did not clap. I did not smile. I turned around and walked back into the house, my hands shaking so badly I could barely twist the knob on my bedroom door. I went straight to my closet. I pulled out the coats, reached behind the shoe boxes, and grabbed the metal lockbox. For a split second, I convinced myself I was being dramatic, that of course it would all be there. It was lighter. I opened it, and my vision blurred. The stacks of bills I had organized so carefully were gone. All that remained was a thin envelope with $500 inside, as if someone had left me an allowance out of pity. $500, out of everything I had built over 3 years. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My ears rang. I sat on the floor, staring at the empty space inside the box, replaying every moment from the argument in my head. They had known exactly where it was. They must have searched my room while I was at work. The shock turned into something hotter. Anger spread through me so fast it felt physical, like fire under my skin. I stood up, marched out of my room, and went straight to the front yard where the celebration was still happening. Chloe was in the driver's seat now, revving the engine while my father leaned through the window, explaining features. My mother was taking photos. I did not care who was watching. I demanded to know where my money was. I said it loud enough that the neighbors stopped clapping. My father straightened up slowly, his expression cold. He told me not to cause a scene. My mother hissed that this was Chloe's day, and I should not ruin it with my dramatics. When I accused them of taking my savings, my father said that everything in this house was family property and that I owed them for years of raising me. They tried to frame it as entitlement on my part, as if I had stolen from them by saving for myself. They told me I should be grateful that my sister would have opportunities because of this car. When I said that was my money, earned from my job, my mother snapped that I was selfish and ungrateful. The worst part was Chloe. She sat there, clutching the steering wheel, avoiding my eyes. Whether she knew or not, I could not tell, but she did not speak up. When I refused to back down, my father told me to go back inside if I could not be supportive. He waved his hand dismissively, like I was an inconvenience at my own home. My mother added that I should not ruin my sister's birthday with my antics. I stood there in the driveway, staring at the car that had been bought with my sacrifices, my missed trips, my overtime hours. The red bow looked obscene to me, like a ribbon tied around betrayal. In that moment, I felt two things more intensely than I ever had before. Shock that my own parents could violate me so completely, and a burning, overwhelming anger that settled deep in my chest. I was not just hurt, I was furious. Update 1. When I stood in that driveway in Columbus watching my sister hug my parents next to a car that had been bought with my savings, something inside me hardened. The shock was still there, sharp and disorienting, but beneath it a new clarity was forming. They had crossed a line they could never uncross. They had not borrowed. They had not asked again. They had taken. That night, the house felt smaller than ever. Laughter echoed from the living room as relatives congratulated Chloe and admired the car parked under the streetlight outside. I stayed in my room, sitting on the edge of my bed with the empty lockbox in my hands. I kept opening it as if the money might reappear out of guilt. It never did. I did not sleep much. Anger has a way of keeping the mind awake. I replayed every detail of the argument, every word they had used to justify themselves. Family property. Owe us for raising you. Do not ruin her birthday. The more I thought about it, the clearer the truth became. They had not just taken my money. They had assumed I would do nothing about it. The next morning, I started paying attention. I watched where my father placed the thick envelope of car documents after showing them off to an uncle. I noticed how my mother kept mentioning that they would handle the paperwork next week, and that they had already called the dealership's administrative office to inform them the car would be transferred into Chloe's name once everything was finalized. That phrase stuck with me. Not yet transferred. Warned the office. Not completed. That meant the title had not been officially signed over to my sister. The following afternoon, while my parents were out at the grocery store and Chloe was at a friend's house, showing off her new ride, I moved quietly through the house. I went straight to the hallway cabinet where my father kept important papers. Birth certificates, tax returns, insurance documents. I had grown up watching him guard that cabinet like a vault. But after the birthday chaos, it had not even been locked. My hands did not shake this time. They were steady. I found the folder with the dealership's logo from Cincinnati printed on the front. Inside were the purchase agreement, temporary registration, proof of payment, and the unsigned title transfer form. I scanned the documents carefully. The buyer was listed as my father. The intended transferee section was blank, prepared for Chloe's information but not yet submitted. They had paid for the car in full, using a combination of what they had taken from me and what little credit they still had left. But legally at that moment, the car belonged to my father, and my father had taken my money. I closed the folder and slipped it into my tote bag. I replaced everything else exactly as it had been, aligning the stacks of paper so no one would notice anything missing at a glance. Then I went back to my room, changed into a blazer, and drove my old, unreliable sedan toward the dealership's administrative office in Cincinnati. The highway stretched ahead of me, flat and endless, cornfields blurring past as I replayed my plan in my mind. I had spent the previous night researching Ohio vehicle transfer laws. I knew what documents were required, what identification was needed, and how title assignments worked. My father had not yet signed the transfer section to Chloe. That meant he still held authority over the title, and I held the documents. When I arrived at the dealership office, I walked in with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. The building was modern, all glass and polished floors, far removed from the tension festering back home. A receptionist greeted me, and I explained that I was there regarding a recent purchase and needed to finalize title details. They checked the file and confirmed that my parents had called to inform them that the vehicle would soon be transferred to their daughter. The paperwork, however, had not yet been processed through the state system. It was still pending. I told them there had been a change. I presented the documents and my identification. I explained that I was the one who had provided the funds for the purchase and that the intended transfer had been reconsidered. I was careful with my words. I did not accuse. I did not rant. I presented it as a straightforward correction. There was a brief moment of hesitation from the administrative clerk, but the documentation in front of them was valid. The title was still assignable. My father's signature was already present in the seller section because he had pre-signed several forms in anticipation of the future transfer. They had trusted the process would unfold smoothly. They had not anticipated me. I completed the transferee section with my own information. Madison Carter, Columbus, Ohio. I signed where required. The clerk processed the change, updating the internal records and preparing the official submission to the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles. I paid the transfer fees without blinking, using a portion of the $500 they had so generously left behind. The entire process took less than an hour. When the clerk handed me the finalized paperwork showing the vehicle now registered under my name, I felt something shift inside me. It was not joy. It was not even relief. It was control returning to its rightful place. The car that had been bought with my stolen savings was now legally mine. I drove back to Columbus, slowly, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the highway. I rehearsed my next steps carefully. This was not about confrontation. It was about precision. When I arrived home, the house was quiet. My parents were still out, and Chloe's car sat in the driveway, gleaming under the sun. I looked at it differently now. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal. It was an asset with my name attached. Inside, I went straight to the hallway cabinet and removed the folder from my bag. I placed every document back exactly where I had found it, aligning the edges, sliding it between the tax returns and insurance policies as if it had never left. On the surface, nothing had changed. The envelope looked untouched, but everything had changed. In my room, I opened my tote bag one last time and looked at the official copy of the updated registration with my name printed clearly across it. Madison Carter, owner. I slid it into a new folder and tucked it into a different hiding place, one my parents would never think to search. Then I closed my closet door, sat on my bed, and allowed myself a small, controlled smile. They had taken my money without hesitation. Now the car was legally mine, and the documents were back in their place, waiting for the moment they would realize what I had done. Update 2. I did not rush the reveal. Revenge is not loud when it is done right. It is quiet, patient, and timed perfectly. For 3 days after transferring the title, I acted normal. I went to work downtown like nothing had happened. I came home, ate dinner at the same table as my parents, and listened to Chloe talk endlessly about how her friends in Columbus could not believe she had her own car at 17. Every time she said the words, her car, I felt the folded registration in my new hiding place upstairs and reminded myself that legally, it was not hers, it was mine. The car sat in the driveway each night, shining under the streetlight like a trophy. My father kept the keys on the kitchen hook, proud and careless. He assumed control was permanent. He assumed paperwork was a formality that would go exactly as he intended. On the 4th night, I decided it was time. It was just after 1 a.m. when I woke up. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the occasional creak of old wood settling. I lay there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, feeling the calm before something irreversible. I got up, pulled on a hoodie, and quietly walked down the stairs. The digital clock on the microwave glowed green in the darkness. I took the keys from the hook without hesitation. My pulse was steady. Outside, the air was cool. The neighborhood was asleep. I walked straight to the silver sedan, unlocked it, and slid into the driver's seat. The interior still smelled new, a mix of leather and factory polish. I adjusted the seat, inserted the key, and started the engine. The sound cut through the quiet like a blade. Within seconds, the front door flew open. Chloe appeared on the porch in pajamas, her hair messy, confusion quickly turning into outrage. She ran toward the driveway, waving her arms. shouting that I needed to get out of her car, that I had no right to touch it. She sounded frantic, like someone watching their property being stolen. I rolled down the window calmly and told her it was not her car. I told her it was mine. The words hit her like a physical blow. She froze for a second, then spun around and ran back inside, yelling for our parents. I could hear her voice echoing through the house as lights flicked on one by one. My mother came out first, robe wrapped tightly around her, eyes wide with anger. My father followed, already red in the face. They marched down the driveway toward me, demanding to know what I thought I was doing. My father pointed at the car and said I was crossing a line, that I needed to step out immediately. I stayed seated, engine running, hands resting casually on the steering wheel. I told them again that this was my car. They laughed at first. Not amused laughter, but dismissive disbelief. My father said he had the documents inside, and that he would gladly show them to me if I needed proof. He said he would bring them out and shove them in my face so I could finally understand that the car did not belong to me. I told him to do exactly that. I told him to bring the documents and read them carefully. He went back inside with exaggerated confidence, my mother following close behind. Chloe stood in the driveway staring at me like I had lost my mind. The porch light cast sharp shadows across the hood of the car, and I could feel the weight of the moment settling into place. A minute later, my father returned holding the familiar dealership folder. He flipped it open dramatically, clearly expecting to humiliate me. My mother leaned over his shoulder, ready to confirm his authority. Chloe hovered behind them, arms crossed. He began reading aloud, listing the purchase details, the vehicle identification number, the payment confirmation. His tone was smug. Then he reached the registration page. There was a pause, a long one. I watched his expression change in real time. The color drained from his face. His eyes scanned the page again, slower this time. My mother grabbed the folder from his hands, irritation flashing across her face, as if she assumed he had misread something. She did the same thing. She scanned the document, frowned, then looked again. Her lips parted slightly as she traced the printed name with her finger. Madison Carter, owner. Not Chloe, not my father, not my mother. Me. The driveway fell completely silent. Even the engine suddenly sounded louder in the stillness. Chloe stepped closer, trying to see what they were looking at. My father flipped through the rest of the paperwork, frantically checking the title copy, the transfer confirmation, the state submission receipt. Every page reflected the same reality. The car was registered in my name. My mother's face shifted from confusion to something closer to panic. My father looked like he had been physically struck. He checked the address, the identification number, every detail, as if hoping it was a printing error. It was not. I finally stepped out of the car, closed the door gently, and stood in front of them. I told them they should read it again, slowly this time. I reminded them that paperwork matters. I reminded them that ownership is not about who makes the loudest announcement in the driveway. They stared at the documents as if they had turned against them. In that moment, standing under the porch light in the quiet Columbus night, my parents realized the truth. The car they had proudly presented as my sister's birthday surprise was legally owned by me. Their names were nowhere on the final registration. The owner of the car was their daughter, not them. Update 3. The night my parents stood in the driveway staring at the registration with my name printed as the owner of the car was the moment everything officially fractured. They did not scream right away. That would have been easier. Instead, there was a stunned silence that felt heavier than any argument we had ever had. My father flipped through the paperwork again, as if the ink might rearrange itself out of loyalty to him. My mother kept repeating that this had to be a mistake, that there was no way the transfer could have happened without them present. Chloe stood frozen beside the porch, her birthday excitement completely drained, staring at the car like it had betrayed her personally. I stayed calm. I did not gloat. I did not raise my voice. I simply stood there and let them process what had happened. The shift from shock to rage was almost predictable. My father demanded that I fix it immediately, that I call the dealership in the morning and reverse whatever I had done. He insisted that the car had been purchased by him and that the intention had always been to give it to Chloe. My mother accused me of manipulation, of going behind their backs, of humiliating them in their own driveway. Chloe looked like she wanted to cry, but was too stunned to decide whether to be angry at me or at them. I reminded them calmly that the money used to purchase that car had been mine. I reminded them that they had taken it without my permission. I reminded them that ownership is determined by documentation, not intention. That only fueled the fire. The next few days were unbearable. The house felt like a courtroom without a judge. My parents cornered me repeatedly, insisting that I sign the car back over. They claimed I had stolen it from them through a technicality. They said I had exploited a loophole. They framed themselves as victims of my betrayal, as if transferring the title had been some elaborate scheme rather than a response to their theft. When I refused to transfer the car back, my father escalated. He told me that if I did not fix it voluntarily, he would take me to court. He said he would prove that the money used to buy the car had come from him. He said the judge would see through my so-called manipulation. I did not flinch. I knew exactly where the money had come from. I had pay stubs. I had withdrawal records. I had years of financial documentation that showed consistent savings. What they did not have was proof that the cash they took from my room belonged to them. Within 2 weeks, I was served with court papers. They had filed a civil lawsuit in Franklin County claiming wrongful transfer of property and seeking to reclaim the vehicle. Seeing my own parents' names listed as plaintiffs against me felt surreal. It was not just a disagreement anymore. It was official. Court day arrived on a humid morning in downtown Columbus. I walked into the courthouse alone, wearing the same blazer I had worn to transfer the title. My parents were already there with a lawyer they had hired using money they did not have. Chloe sat behind them, eyes down, avoiding me entirely. During the hearing, my father tried to paint a narrative of deception. He argued that he had purchased the car with his funds and that I had unlawfully inserted myself into the title process. He claimed the dealership had made an error. He implied that I had tricked the administrative staff. But when the judge asked for evidence, the story unraveled. There were no bank statements showing that he had withdrawn the specific amount in cash for the purchase. There were no written agreements stating that the funds were his. The dealership records showed a valid title transfer processed according to state law, with proper signatures and identification. My documentation showed consistent savings over 3 years, including withdrawals that aligned with the purchase date. The judge asked one simple question that cut through everything. Was there proof that the money used to buy the vehicle belonged to my parents rather than me? There was none. Intent does not override documentation. Assumptions do not override signed titles. The case was dismissed. When the judge ruled in my favor, I did not feel triumphant. I felt final. Something closed inside me that day. The courtroom doors opened, and whatever remained of our family dynamic walked out separately. The car remained legally mine. My parents did not speak to me on the drive back. That evening, they did not wait long before delivering their next decision. They told me that if I insisted on keeping the car, I could no longer live under their roof. They said they did not want to see me anymore. They framed it as my choice, as if their actions had not triggered the entire chain of events. I was not surprised. In fact, I had been preparing. That night, I went upstairs and started packing. Clothes first, then documents, then the few personal items that actually mattered. I left behind anything that felt replaceable. The house that had once felt like security now felt like a place where trust had been quietly dismantled piece by piece. By midnight, my bags were lined up by the door. The silver sedan sat in the driveway, legally mine, quietly waiting. I carried my suitcases out one by one. No one came to help. No one tried to stop me. Chloe watched from the living room window. My mother stayed seated on the couch, arms crossed. My father stood in the hallway, rigid and silent. I loaded the trunk, got into the driver's seat, and took one last look at the house where I had grown up. It looked smaller than I remembered. I drove away without honking, without waving, without turning back. Over the next few months, I rented a small apartment near Short North. I rebuilt my savings slowly. I cut every tie that connected me to that house. I changed my mailing address. I removed my name from shared accounts. I blocked their numbers. They did not reach out to apologize. They did not attempt reconciliation. The silence between us solidified into permanence. I never spoke to them again. The car that had started everything became my daily reminder that control over my life belonged to me alone. The lawsuit, the eviction, the family fracture, all traced back to one simple decision they made when they chose to take what was not theirs. They demanded I return the car. They filed a lawsuit. They lost. They told me to leave, so I did, and I never looked back.